Oh, hello there, and welcome to the world of Pokemon. A world that's inhabited far and wide by creatures known as Pokemon. My name is Professor Noble, and today I'm going to be teaching you about the wonderful world of Pokemon, specifically Generation 3. So sit back, relax, and let's explore the wonderful world of these 5 games now, shall we? Part 1. Introduction. Our story starts off in the early 2000s, where Pokemania was coming to a slow trickle. With the release of Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green, people were starting to lose interest in Pokemon. Despite Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald being considered by some as the best-selling games for the GBA, with the popularity of Pokemon waning at the time, the games sold less than the previous generations, with Red and Blue having sold nearly 27 million units worldwide, and Gold and Silver selling over 23 million units. But despite these sales, gaming outlets scored these games with high reviews and scores, with some scoring them at 9.5 out of 10. Generation 3 was the first generation of Pokemon games where I had my own copy. I didn't have to get it secondhand from my cousins or from a family member. My mom and dad were kind enough to gift me a GBA and a copy of Pokemon Ruby and then Emerald when it came out back in 2005. My 7-year-old mind was just blown away by how gorgeous the graphics were at the time. A part of early 2000s Pokemon that stuck with me as a kid were the posters and ads for the games. They were just perfect works of art. Specifically, this one for Pokemon Emerald, I don't know what it is about this one that just captivated me as a kid. I guess I just envisioned myself as the kid in the poster, looking at Hoenn while surfing on my Pokemon. It was just such a good ad. 12 years later, on the exact date that they were released, Game Freak released an enhanced remake of these games called Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. Albeit they didn't capture the essence of what I felt as a kid when I first played them, they had a significant gameplay enhancement and quality of life improvements over their remake counterparts. With this video, we're going to discuss the history and differences between these games and why I love them so much. Part 2. The story and history of Generation 3. The plot for the game starts off fairly simple, just like every other Pokemon game prior, except with a few twists and turns. You're greeted by Professor Birch, the Pokemon professor of this region. One thing I enjoy and love in the remakes is the nostalgia point they earned when they used the exact same intro from Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald. I've found this to be a nice touch. After picking out which character you'd like to play as, you pick your name. Oddly enough, Pokemon Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald is the first Pokemon game in the series where you can't pick the name for your rival, which adds more emphasis to the character and makes the rival stand out more and become more memorable. A trend they've only kept in a select few games, unfortunately. But after the introduction with the professor, you seem to woken up in the back of a moving van to your new hometown of Littleroot. Little fact, the protagonist of Generation 3 apparently moved here from Johto, which kinda means that Johto and Hoenn must be very close considering they used a moving van and no mention of flying prior to this. If we go based off the etymology of Junichi Masuda and this map I found on Bulbapedia, it seems like Hoenn is just a hop skip away from Johto and Kanto. In both the remakes and the demakes, you save the professor from a wild Poochyena and gain your starter. These starters are debated as some as the best starters in Pokemon to date, next to the Sinnoh ones by fans. And you know, I kinda agree. You have your basic 3 starters: Treecko, the grass type, Torchic, the fire type, and Mudkip, the water type. Whichever one you pick, the region is chock full of alternatives for the other types. And every time you play the game, you can mix and match your team members with all kinds of Pokemon. For this playthrough and review, I picked Mudkip because who doesn't like Mudkips? But one thing I do enjoy over the remakes is the graphical fidelity on how pretty the game looks, even for a handheld title like the 3DS. But here is where we meet our first blunder that Gen 3 made, and that's introducing a majority of Generation 3 into its route. Which isn't a bad thing, games like Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum also do this, as well as Black and White. But a fault this game made that harmed the experience for veterans is the fact that you can't trade Pokemon from Generation 1 and 2 from the original Game Boy. Reasons behind this is because Gen 1 and 2 Pokemon weren't programmed with natures and abilities in mind, making them obsolete and essentially creating a Dexit problem like Pokemon Sword and Shield even before we knew it. But aside from this, the game is essentially a straightforward Pokemon game all in all. Collect 8 badges, beat the Elite Four and the Champion, hunt down the legendaries, and try to collect the Pokedex. Pretty simple. One thing I enjoyed in terms of legendary hunting in this game is the fact that back in the day, they used Braille to hide the 3 Regis. And because of this, I used to rent a Braille book with my mom from the library. It was a fun memory, and I got to learn some stuff with my mom. Pokemon has always been a series that's been near and dear to my heart, and Emerald holds a very special place in my heart for being the Pokemon game I've spent the most time trying to complete the Dex for, with actually getting a legit Eon ticket and obtaining a chance to catch Latios, trading it to my Ruby save, then catching Latios again and trading it back to my Emeralds to get a copy of both of them. Or rather, 2 Latioses and 2 Latias. I think that's how you say it. And the remakes, they've made obtaining legendaries sorta easy, but still challenging. The Regis are still obtainable, but using a different method than from the original. This time, they've added around tons of legendaries, making hunting them for hours of fun and pretty satisfying. Some legendaries are easy to find, as find a portal and interact with it, a welcome departure from the method to obtain legendaries from the original. Unfortunately, the memories of obtaining an Eon ticket when you were a kid are gone with this method. One gripe that I have with legendary hunting in the remakes is that a lot of legendaries are locked behind getting both exclusive legendaries from both versions. For example, you'll need to trade with another copy of either game to get both Palkia and Dialga in your team in order to catch Giratina. This is good because, you know, it encourages trading, but also very annoying because I can't catch my goddamn boy! But these legendaries play a very small part in terms of the overall story to the game, if any at all. So I'm not really upset about owning 2 copies of the game, but fuck legendaries, we got waifus, boy! So Generation 3 introduces us to a new crime syndicate known as Team Aqua and Team Magma. Aqua is owned by Archie and Magma is owned by Maxie. One thing I enjoyed of the newer games is how stylized they made all the characters look, giving them a complete makeover and overhaul from the originals. Look at Maxie compared to his old design, and Archie compared to his old design as well. It's astonishing how amazing and new they look, despite being the same character for more than a decade ago when the original was released. The art style for this game is very pretty, and albeit dated, but still a joy to look at. I don't know what to say, I'm a sucker for chibi art styles. But back to the villains of the story. During your adventures on Hoenn, you'll need to defeat either Team Magma or Team Aqua depending on the version you have. In the originals, you can play Emerald and fight both of them at once, whereas in the remake, you can only fight one of the teams. This sucks, and I was really wishing for a Delta Emerald game where you can fight both of them just like in the original Emerald, but this was the beginning of a trend where Pokemon games never got that 3rd installment to each generation. Which sucks, but makes sense in the long run, since sometimes people won't pay for the same game again with only minor changes. Part 3. The actual story of Generation 3. The actual story for how Gen 3 came to be the game it is today happened because of a government construction project known as the Isahaya Bay Land Reclamation. Don't worry, I'm not gonna bother you too much with this. Instead, I'll direct you to a video that Tamahiro made on the subject, and also the true story of how Gen 3 happened and by what it was inspired by. But I'll give a short summary for the themes of Generation 3. Generation 3 revolves around one team of villains wanting to expand the land, while the other wants to expand the sea. Kinda like what Japan wanted to do with the Isahaya Bay Land Reclamation. Both of these options seem to be a bit too radical for either of them to happen. If you expand the sea, then there won't be enough land for people to live on, and for farmers to farm. And, you know, produce food. If you expand the land, you'll risk extinction of various endangered animals that live near the sea and make it difficult for fishermen to do their jobs. a huge conundrum that the people of Japan were facing at the time. And because of this, Game Freak made it a theme for Generation 3, and wanted to shed light on the situation that is happening on Japan for the outside world. Unfortunately, this was a time when Pokemon was on a decline, at least for a time, and this message was ignored. Which is a shame, because now as an adult, I think it's pretty smart for them to use their platform to teach younger audiences about what's happening on the other side of the world. It's too bad the execution missed the bullseye by this much! The story and plot that Generation 3 had wasn't relatable enough for the mass market of a ginormous place like the US. I mean, sure, it might be relatable for someone who lives on an island. Point at me. People in the US were never gonna get what it's like to live on a tiny island in the middle of the ocean. I guess that's one benefit I have for living here. And as an adult, it started resonating to me how important it was to protect nature. The remakes do this story as well, with a few differences here and there, but it's pretty much the same message years later. I know that sounded super hippie, but the message was still there. Overall, the remakes were one of my favorite games on 3DS. And going back to them and replaying them, I can see some negatives and some positives that people pointed out about. Specifically the fact that a portion of the region is water. Now, I'm not going to say that a huge portion of Hoenn is based in these regions with water. If anything, the exact opposite. Here's a map of Hoenn. Here's a map of the areas that are mandatory and that aren't. No one forces you to surf through these areas or routes. All of the green area is optional. As for the place like surfing to Moss Deep or surfing to Team Aqua's base, it's pretty easy and linear to get there. The only other time that I can think of that makes the sea a mandatory thing for you to travel on would be in Emerald when you need to go to the Sky Pillar to awaken Rayquaza. In the remakes they also do this as well, but I mean, it's still not that heavy. Despite how you feel about Generation 3, whether you hate it or love it, we can all agree that Generation 3 was, for a lot of us, our first Pokemon game. For me specifically, it was the first one I managed to beat on my own, knowing what team I wanted to use and what types I needed to use during battle. It was around the time that I started to fully understand Pokemon and pretty much focus on every aspect of the game rather than just aimlessly pressing A on a random move and hoping that it would kill the trainer's Pokemon. It was also the time where I started to make friends at school that had similar interests in nerd shit like Pokemon, and we bonded over said nerd shit. Even though Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire didn't spark what initially made me love the originals, it was still a fun time for me to play and come back through and compare a lot of differences between them. I've had so much fun over the past few days playing Pokemon Alpha Sapphire on my own and with my girlfriend via Discord call that it was just, it brought me back to just being a kid. But that's it for the video. It was a fun experiment to go outside of my comfort zone and make a video about Pokemon, something I enjoy. It was something I enjoyed as a kid and I still do as an adult. This was more of a passion project rather than just me making a video for making ends meet. I actually really did enjoy this video and I hope you do too. If you like this video, please make sure to like and subscribe. And also, if you have any stories about playing Pokemon as a kid or as an adult, I'd like to hear them in the comment section down below. But that's it for me. Hopefully you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys probably next time making another video. Until then, see ya!